more on the peace talks, here with me is Hudson Institute Senior Fellow Rebeccah Heinrichs and former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor and former State Department official David Tafuri. Well, Rebeccah, that was a major tweet from the president right there. This is really the most we've seen him call out Russian President Vladimir Putin and threaten him with sanction actions thus far, right?
That's right. But you remember, he never took any of this off the table. So for those who got really pessimistic, it looked like, the president was going to be really, really tough on the Ukrainians to pressure them to want peace. Look, the Ukrainians, it worked. The Ukrainians, they want a ceasefire, an unconditional ceasefire. Zelensky has relented on that really since March. It has been the Russians that continue to attack civilians, and they do it. The timing is terrible. They do it every time Special Envoy Witkoff announces that they've made progress. And so I think President Trump is now moving into the next phase, which is now to pressure the Russians. Secondary sanctions would crush the war machine because it would cut off that energy really being, through India and through China continues to do business with Russia. So you cut that off, you really dry up the Russian war machine.
Hey, David, this morning the meeting with President Trump, President Zelensky at the Vatican. They said that it was a productive meeting, though I think almost every meeting in the readout is a productive meeting. But it actually does seem like they may have had a pretty good meeting this morning.
I think so. First of all, it's a stunning image to see the president and President Zelensky talking one-on-one, just sitting on two chairs, nobody else around them, in this historic place, St. Peter's Basilica. And it's a juxtaposition to that Oval Office meeting that went so badly. And also, they were talking without cameras recording what they were saying, which is also very different from the Oval Office meeting. And that's how negotiations like this should take place. They should take place privately because they're very sensitive. If you look at the post that came from President Zelensky, and you just showed it, and from President Trump, it seems like it was a good meeting. And I applaud President Trump for now turning around and saying, look, it looks like Putin is the one who is the recalcitrant party. And then he went to the most important subject in many ways, which is, what am I going to do to get Putin to make concessions? And he talked about sanctions, and importantly, secondary sanctions, because Russia is getting most of its revenues from oil, and it's able to sell oil to India and China. But if there were secondary sanctions on the companies that enable that to happen, that would really harm Russia's economy.
Now, Rebeccah, you've had so many congressional Republicans step back, not comment too much on what's going on with the negotiations, but you're now starting to see a lot of Republicans come out and say, look, Russia is the aggressor here. This is from Senator Chuck Grassley, who said, I've seen enough killing of innocent Ukrainian women and children. President Trump, please put the toughest of sanctions on Putin. You ought to see from clear evidence that he is playing America as a patsy. Do you think that this is now the vanguard of maybe more Republicans coming out for more sanctions against Russia?
Well, look, remember, Republicans and Democrats, they're all back for recess. They're going back, they're listening to their constituents. And the Trump base, the Republican base, has an opinion about this. Yes, they want President Trump to end the war, but not peace at any cost. They want the war to end on terms that are good for the victim, the defender, which is Ukraine. And so I think, yeah, you're going to see Senator Grassley, you're going to see Senator Wicker, other leaders in the Republican Party come out and say, okay, this is enough. We've given the president lots of space to put pressure on Ukraine. You got to crank up the pressure now on Russia. Russia's the aggressor. We want peace, but we want peace on terms that are lasting peace, good for the American people, good for NATO, and good for Ukraine.
David, over the last couple of days, we've gotten a little more nuggets from the president and the White House about what exactly the president's red lines are. And he was asked, what is Russia giving up here? And he responded that Russia's not going to take the whole country. That's the Russian concession here. Should the U.S. even believe that?
Well, I don't believe, and the U.S. should not believe, that that's what Russia wants. Russia wants to control Ukraine. Maybe not necessarily occupy the whole country, but it wants a pro-Putin president in Kiev. And that's why they invaded in February 2022. They're not going to accomplish that. But I don't think it's enough to say giving up on that goal is enough of a concession. Putin needs to give more. He's going to have to give back some of the territory in the 4 provinces that he says he has annexed with sham referendums that weren't appropriate, weren't free and fair. And he's also going to have to make some concessions about perhaps the presence of European troops in Ukraine to monitor the ceasefire and ensure that it is observed by Russia, and if it is not, there are consequences. He may also have to make some concessions on European allies giving security guarantees to Ukraine, because Ukraine needs that also to be secure, that if Russia violates the ceasefire, that there will be consequences for Putin.
Yeah, it's not exactly like this war has gone swimmingly for the Russians. Let's turn to some other negotiations. The Iran talks today. There was another round in Oman. Apparently, there's going to be, according to senior U.S. officials, another round soon in Europe. Do you think that there can be any agreement there, Rebeccah, or do you think that the Iranians are just playing for time here?
Well, they're playing for time right now, and you can see that because some of the Iranian officials continue to post on Truth or post on Twitter different things that are aggressive, threatening the United States, threatening Israel. So they've not indicated that they're actually willing to come up with a solution that's good for the United States. President Trump has been very clear that he wants total dismantlement of the nuclear program. And he's just appointed now Michael Anton, who's going to be the technical expert negotiating, and he hasn't even gotten in there yet to begin. So we are not, I wouldn't even say we're in early stages. We're pre-early stages of anything serious. But in order for this to work, the Iranians have to understand that the United States has a credible military threat. That's why you have those B-2 bombers and Diego Garcia. And the Israelis are, of course, a big player in this. They're going to have a say in how this goes. But Iran's going to have to be compelled to negotiate to get rid of their nuclear program. You
know, you had Senator Fetterman say that the president should just waste that expletive when it comes to these facilities. David, you know from the Obama administration and then even the Biden administration, these talks, they go on forever. And you don't end up necessarily with the best deal in the world. You don't necessarily dismantle all of Iran's nuclear capabilities. Is this a fool's errand, or is there a way to avoid attacks here?
Well, first of all, I agree that there's bipartisan support in Congress for talks like this. And I also agree with what Rebeccah said about President Trump, which he's insisting on complete dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program. And that is the goal, and that's what we should be trying to achieve. I do think it's possible that there could be an agreement. But what I think is going to be very difficult is to get a better agreement than the JCPOA, which is the deal that President Obama got during his presidency, which President Trump kept criticizing. I'm not sure Iran is going to give up any more than they gave up back then.
Well, they're talking. We'll see if anything comes out of it. David Tafuri, Rebeccah Heinrichs, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.